Okay, I've got 3 or 4, not sure how many stories we're going to pack into this video, but they're all good. Every one of them is good. All right, here we go. First story we have I want you to hear is from a woman in North Georgia, and she writes, I've listened to your videos on YouTube and wanted to let you know that I really enjoy hearing these stories, and this is the reason I'm reading the intro of this email. She says, it has compelled me to come forward with my story to share with you anonymously, please. Of course, if you ask to be anonymous, they're going to be anonymous, but here's the thing about this. You know, I think I've got 20 or 30 videos up, and this is becoming a Bigfoot free zone. I know that there are a lot of Bigfoot reporting websites you could send your story to, and a lot of you have, and that's good. But they, for the most part, I think they cipher through the stories and they, give you a class 1 or class 4 Bigfoot sighting. I don't care what kind of Bigfoot sighting you have. And we're going to have our website up in probably around 30 days. We're going to switch to where you won't be sending your encounters to an email address. You will be entering them into the website for everyone to read. You'll still be able to stay anonymous, which I think is very important. But I don't care. My theory is I don't know that there's a Bigfoot story ever told that can be totally verified. And so I give them all equal weight. And that's what we're going to continue to do until something changes. And I don't see that changing. If you send me a story and in the future, if you enter it on the website, it's going to be there for everyone to read. We're going to give them numbers or something so that if we put them in a video, we'll say you can go reference Bigfoot file number 658. I don't know, something like that. I just thought that was cool that she said that she felt compelled to come forward, felt free to come forward anonymously and have her story told and listened to by a lot of people, and it has weight. These are good stories and they're important to people, and I love putting them out. Okay, I'm going to quit running my mouth. She writes, I used to live in a heavily wooded subdivision in North Georgia. There are no numbers on houses and no street lights, and the mailboxes are at the top of the road, all clustered together. All dirt roads. I lived there for about 5 years, and during that time, I encountered numerous deer and bear. I'm a single mother, 5 foot 8 inches and 125 pounds. She's a little bitty thing. And at that time, I was 43 years old. I'm also disabled with head, neck, and back injuries from serious car accidents several years ago. I do not scare easily. One of 4 siblings, and I learned to be tough and play rough. I served time in the United States Air Force as a jet mechanic right after high school, so I learned to be brave. Now here's my story. One morning, I was on my way out after my son had left for school. I was going to meet a friend for breakfast. It was during the spring of 2012, so the weather was nice and the foliage was coming in, but not so thick that you could still see through the woods. As I was approaching a corner near the top of the road where all the mailboxes were located, I saw something that was very large and hairy crouching down behind a tall hardwood tree. I stared at it, trying to see what it was. I first thought that it was a bear, but then I noticed it was only on 2 legs and not 4. It was very focused on whatever it was staring at, but then it heard me coming and turned its head sideways, but did not look at me directly. It was looking at me through its peripheral vision. For a second, it froze. I hit the brakes and came to a complete stop. And then it stood up. It was huge. I never saw its face, just the right side profile and the back of its head. What I did see was an enormous butt and legs like tree trunks, a very hairy body with red and brown hair, and what looked to me like a bald head at the top with long hair in the back. A mullet. A Bigfoot mullet. I could not tell where the head ended and the shoulders began. It was very muscular. I saw a tremendous amount of dirt being kicked up into the cloud as it leaped. And when I say leaped, I mean 5 to 10 feet per leap. I saw the top of its head was above my neighbor's deck rail, and then it leaped over their propane tank, and one final leap down into the ravine towards the river. This was a ravine that was so steep that you would need rope to be lowered down, but it just jumped into the air and was gone in a few seconds. Whatever this thing was, it moved so fast that my eyes could barely follow it. I will tell you this. There would be no way to outrun this thing if you came across it in the woods on foot. No way. My heart was pounding and my mouth was open, and I couldn't tell you what I saw. I've lived in Georgia my whole life except when I was in the service, and I've never seen anything like it. The size of it made me tremble, and the strength and speed with which it moved was incredible. What concerned me was not knowing what it was and its size and strength, but I was not afraid of this thing. The thought on my mind was that whatever it was, it did not want to be seen. It didn't move because I startled it, nor was it afraid of me at all. It just did not want to be seen. I sat there for a second in my car trying to process what had just happened. What was it doing? What was it looking at so intently that it failed to hear me coming? I started to drive away because it was definitely gone, and as I rounded the corner, I saw the mail truck sitting at the mailboxes and the lady sitting there sifting through the mail before putting it in the boxes. She was totally clueless and had no idea what had just happened. Then it occurred to me that it was watching the mail lady intently. That's what it was doing, crouching and hiding behind the tree when I came upon it. What struck me as odd was that it didn't appear like it was stalking. It appeared curious and was hiding. That is all. I have never seen it again. I walked around for 2 days still in kind of shock before I finally told my sister about what I had seen. She was very skeptical about it and suggested that I might have seen a wild pig or something like that. I started doing research and trying to find anything that looked like what I saw. I still haven't seen anything like it today. I did find a video on YouTube about an officer who was driving near the area with his dash cam on and caught something like it running across the road. What I saw moved the same way this thing in the video did. Anyway, please feel free to contact me if you have any questions. That is all I have to report, and it's enough for me in this lifetime. I hope I never encounter it again. Either way, I know what I saw, and I will never forget it. And she writes, have a blessed day. This is one of those encounters where you're not looking, you're not out hunting Bigfoot, you're not hunting, you're just going to lunch with a friend, and you round a corner and here's this animal standing on the side of the road crouching behind a tree. I mean, what in the world goes through your mind when you see something like that? I think she saw it and was able to reflect on all the thoughts she had and what she had seen over the next couple of days and kind of worked it out in her mind exactly what this thing was, and I don't disagree with her. So thank you very much for the email. This encounter is sent to me by Alan, who this is an encounter that happened in Indiana. He writes, I'm 57 and I've lived in Georgia my whole life except for 11 years when I lived in southern Indiana right after getting remarried. I've hunted and fished since I was a boy and spent a lot of time in the woods. I also trout fish in the mountains and did some trapping as a teenager. While living in Indiana, I had a buddy at work who had a small piece of property where he said he always saw deer and turkey, and he took me there and showed me the property lines. Over the next 9 years, I killed a dozen or so deer there. On the day of this incident, I killed a doe with my muzzleloader, and a friend from church killed a doe with his shotgun. We field dressed them at the truck, and we left. We both left our stands on the trees because we were going to hunt again that evening. Neither of us saw any deer that evening, and I came down the tree when it was too dark to see anymore. I took my climbing stand off the tree, and with a small light on the bill of my hat, I could see my friend coming down his tree maybe 100 yards away because he too had a light. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I answered it since I was through hunting and heading out. My son wanted me to pick up some food on the way home. When I said goodbye and put the phone in my pocket, the loudest scream or roar I have ever heard came from about 50 yards away. It rattled the woods, it was so loud. I listened the other day to a video of the Mississippi Bigfoot howls. It sounded like that, but a little lower pitched and no short yips between the roars. It roared twice, and I was ready to get to the truck and wishing I had brought my shotgun instead of a muzzle loader, so I'd have 5 shots instead of 1. The weirdest thing to me was that the sound came from exactly where my doe had fallen that morning. A pipeline easement ran through these woods. My doe had run about 30 yards on the other side of the pipeline, and that is right where the sounds came from, almost like whatever it was mad at me for taking the doe. My friend was pretty freaked out too, but later tried to act like it was a fox. No fox could have made that noise. What do you think? The area where this happened was very close to the town of Mockport, Indiana, very close to the Ohio River. Hope I said the name of that town right. But Alan, I don't know. I would have to hear it. And I got an email about this the other day. Somebody was describing a sound, and I don't know unless I hear it what it is. And I'm not really that woodsy, so I'm not sure what a lot of these noises are. And even if I didn't know what it is, I'm not sure I would even want to guess what this thing was. But you heard it. It was loud. You say it shook the woods, and it was coming from where you dropped a doe. I don't know. Maybe, I'm just guessing, but maybe it was hacked off. You took some of its food. Or maybe it was a naturalist and wanted to, maybe it was an anti-hunting Bigfoot. Who knows? But I thought that was interesting because you don't have to see them to have an encounter. You can have horrifying noises come at you from the woods, and there's nothing in the woods that roars in North America. Maybe a bear, but that's way up north, not in Indiana. And the only bears that really make big noise are the big brown bears and the grizzly bears. So I don't know. It's interesting though, and you heard it. You know what you think it was. I think that's good enough. The next story I want you to hear is from Jim. I don't know where this encounter takes place, but this is really good. It's not super confrontational, but it's very interesting, and I think a lot of people have these type encounters. I am now 58 years of age. Thinking back, I remember more than one time where something unusual happened to me and my sister while my parents were away for a few days. Our home sat on the first 10 acres sold from a 1,300-acre farm, which had recently been held in a land bank. So throughout my teenage years, my siblings and I had the run of this 1,300-acre farm. One mid-afternoon back in 1973, I was still too young for deer season, so I was watching TV and eating chili. The sliding door opened. It was my sister returning early from deer hunting. My sister entered our house wide-eyed and very excited. I immediately thought she had shot a buck and needed help dragging it out of the woods. Instead, my sister began to tell me that she had walked across a nearby 80-acre field leading back to the swamp. The swamp along that field jutted out into these thick swampy points which always held deer. This usually made for a great chance to bag something before returning home. So we always took this route home. For some reason this day she had decided to walk up by the edge of the road as she crossed the field. I asked my sister if she had seen any deer in the field on her way back. She began to tell me about seeing a black bear. We never even see signs of black bear, so I was really interested in what she was telling me. My sister continued to tell me that the bear had walked all the way across the field, and that the bear and her had walked parallel to each other as they made their way back towards our house. I asked if the bear had seen her. She told me it had turned its head and looked at her a couple of times, but the bear didn't really have any interest in her at all. It just kept walking. As she spoke to me, I noticed she was having a difficult time looking me in the eyes. Then she told me what was bothering her. The bear had walked across the entire field on its hind legs, just like a person. I then asked where the bear had gone. The only thing she was thinking about when she got close to the house was getting in the house and getting away from the bear. My sister carried either a shotgun with buckshot or a slug or a rifle. I do not remember what she was carrying on this day. I immediately thought how the field where the bear had walked was covered with lichen and brown moss, and that I just might be able to see some tracks. Over the next couple of days, I looked the field over. I watched the field and the swamp edge with binoculars. I came up empty-handed and very disappointed. I was in the woods daily. I never ever found any sign of bear in the area. No scraping, rubs on the trees, no scat, and no hair. Parts of the swamp were very thick, so thick that I would crawl on my hands and knees to get through to hunt some of these areas. Some of the nearby swamps are so big and thick that people have gone in and have never been seen again. The only animal that I can think of this being is a Bigfoot, possibly just passing through our fields to get to where it was going. I continued to hunt for many years after my sister saw the bear walk on its hind legs. I never saw anything out of the usual. But after that day, my sister would not hunt unless she was with me or another family member or a friend. You know, she sees the Bigfoot, or she sees what she thinks is a bear across the field. I don't remember if he said how far it was, probably quite a distance. But wouldn't that be weird to have a bear walking on two legs paralleling you down a field, even if it's 100 yards away? I mean, that's creepy. If the bear's going to be rummaging around or digging around for food on all four legs, he's not going to be walking in an upright position. Although I have seen a viral video that's been going around the internet lately of this bear that was missing one of its front paws and had learned to walk on its back two legs everywhere it went. But I think the chances of that happening in two different locations is pretty remote. She saw an upright figure that actually turned its head and looked at her. It's one of those kind of creepy encounters that probably sticks with somebody. Nothing happens to her, but that has to stick in your mind when you go back into the woods. I mean, what in the world could have been? I don't know. Probably a Bigfoot. Anyway, Jim, thanks for sending that in. That's a really cool story. This next encounter is from Greg, and he writes, "This is a story about an experience my mother and aunt, her older sister, had back in 1954 near Elkhorn City, Kentucky. My mom and her sister lived in one of the many mountainous regions of eastern Kentucky. The mountains surrounded their home, and actually a hillside connected to the mountain range came almost to their back door. One Sunday afternoon, the two ladies walked across the road from their home to a small store across the street to get a bottle of pop. While sitting outside drinking their pop and chatting with the store owner, my aunt noticed movement on the hillside above their home. She became very upset and started to cry while pointing up the hill to an overlook that was connected to an old haul road. When my mother and the store owner looked to where she was pointing, they saw a large man standing and looking at them. After looking closer, all three saw that the man was covered in hair. The hair on the head was long and flowing, while the rest of the hair looked to be about 4 inches long. The store owner exclaimed, "What the hell? That's some kind of wild man." At this point, the wild man turned and walked away from the edge and followed the old road and would periodically look back at them. My mom and aunt dropped their pops and ran home to get inside and lock the doors. When my grandfather and oldest uncle got home a few hours later, they were told by my mom and aunt about what they saw. The two men walked over to the store, and the store owner corroborated the same story. My grandpa had the girls come over to the store while him and my uncle drove up to the haul road and got out at the overlook. My uncle was over 6 feet tall, and when he stood at the overlook, the store owner exclaimed that the wild man had made my uncle look like a pipsqueak compared to it in size and height. They didn't think to look for tracks because no one at the time knew what a Bigfoot was. But recent strange happenings around their home suddenly seemed unexplainable. My grandma always made enough biscuits to feed an army and kept the leftover ones on a sideboard in the kitchen. Recently, a whole pan of leftover cathead biscuits had come up missing. None of the 11 kids at home, nor did Grandpa take credit or blame for stealing the biscuits. They had also noticed the back door was left open a few times and was open at the time of the biscuit caper. Also, there had been an assault on their chicken coop that my grandpa wrote off as being the work of a bear, but a large branch was broken off the next tree to the coop that was close to the 10 feet off the ground and thick as a man's forearm. This was the only time they saw the wild man, and I'm reminded of this story every time I travel past the area where it occurred. Thanks for reading my story. Greg, I love that story. I love these stories that reach back beyond, say, 1975. All of these old stories mean something today. These are encounters and sightings and strange things that happened that we can take today, knowing what we know, and put it all together. And I think they're fascinating. I love the old nostalgic stories. So thank you, Greg, for sending that to me. This encounter is from a young man who lives in South Carolina, or the encounter happened in South Carolina. And he writes, I'm 23 years old, and I'm a big outdoorsman. I was 12 when I first encountered what I believe to be a Bigfoot. I was hunting in Chester, South Carolina, along with my older brother and my dad. We had been out there since daybreak all the way until sundown. It was about 9:30 in late October. I was sitting against a tree on the ground holding my rifle. I started to hear something walking behind me. My heart started racing, and I was hoping it was a deer. I sat there as quiet as I could when something big, and I mean big, walked right up to me. It was about 8 feet tall and maybe 5 feet from where I was sitting. It just kept looking down at me. It was the longest 5 minutes of my life, and I was frozen. I felt like this thing could easily end me. At this point, I completely forgot I even had my rifle and was accepting my fate. The Bigfoot just let out a small snort like a deer would and then started to walk down the hill away from me. It started to move rocks and branches around like it was making a nest or something. My dad walked over to me and asked why I was throwing things down the hill. I was still frozen in fear, and I just pointed down the hill. My dad looked up and picked me up off the ground and said, "We need to leave now." We left the woods without injury. We don't talk much about it, and we still hunt in that area. That's an interesting encounter from a young man remembering back when he was 12 years old. I'm sure that was pretty traumatic, and it's I don't think it's common that they walk right up to you, but I guess it's possible. And at any rate, that's a good story, good memory, or scary memory. Thanks, man. The last story we have tonight is from Melvin. Melvin is a avid listener to this channel, and he always makes the nicest comments. And so, hey, Melvin. Melvin had sent a story in probably 2 months ago, and it was really long, and I was going to get to it. But since then, he sent me another one, and I'm going to share this one with you. It's pretty good. It's not just a huge, fantastic encounter, but it's very interesting, and I think Melvin is a thinker. He looks at these things and he sorts them out in his mind, and he's real methodical about the way he thinks about his experiences. So he writes, an interesting thing happened about 10 years ago in the neighborhood I live in still today. I live in rural Oklahoma next to the lake with a seasonal recreational traffic that can get sketchy in the warm months. Most of the residents know and respect each other and the properties. However, this happened in the middle of winter, so it's out of keeping for it to be, say, a drifter or an escaped prisoner, as there is a penitentiary 26 miles south of us. If it would have been an escapee, we usually get the warning that helps them locate them and direct efforts to recapture them, but no such warning was out. I had settled in to a movie for the evening around 8. My little buddy Harley, my chihuahua, was beside me curled up. He's very protective and territorial, always had a sharp ear. He alerted to a noise I just barely heard myself. We had a horse trailer parked about 50 yards from the house out back that was pointing away from the fence with a loading door towards it. It definitely sounded like the loading door banging closed, not loudly but enough to hear. I always have a shotgun loaded and ready. so I grabbed it and went to check. I left Harley in the house. He thought he was a big dog and he knew no fear. I have a light on the Mossberg because of varmints like raccoons and possums and coyotes. Anyhow, I step out the front door and move to the side of the house, peeking around the corner to see if I can see any movement. I can. Whatever was there was messing about behind the trailer. I couldn't see detail, but it was a big animal, whatever it was. Human or not, I don't know. Down here, whitetails don't grow that big. It was taller than me. At the moment, I didn't feel threatened, so I didn't light it up. I observed it. We didn't have a horse at the time, though we'd recently had one, and the trailer had not been mucked out. Hay was still in it. I thought maybe it was a transient, maybe just looking for a place to sleep the night. Being an over-the-road driver for the 20 years, I had seen some things that are stranger than this. And then I think, this is the wrong time of year for a transient to be out. Harley got in the back window and started raising a fuss. Whatever it was hadn't seen me. This got its attention though, and it froze. It never gave me a look, and it must have spotted my breath coming around the corner. It sprinted to and over the fence with ease and without hesitation. I never got a chance to even raise the Mossberg to point the light. If it was human, it was wearing very dark clothing. If it wasn't, I don't know. It was on 2 legs, though, and cleared a 4-foot barbed wire, 5-strand fence. Here's the interesting thing. Our property backs up to 80 acres of rarely used land. I have leased it occasionally for hunting. I live on virtually an island with a small spit of land connecting on the south. Deer traffic is thick and frequent. The lady who owns the property is a well-known eccentric personality. She loves deer and watches as well as feeds them, so you can imagine the amount of traffic that time of year. Gun season was just over and I had scored a doe for the freezer. Some of the mess was still there from cleaning it. Just some blood stains on the ground and some hair. I hadn't washed down the area yet, so I truly expect it to be a varmint. Nothing else has happened since that time. Melvin, that was pretty cool. I mean, I think you know what this was. I mean, if it was bigger than a deer and on 2 legs and you saw it jump over a fence, I think you're being humble and modest, but I think you know what this was. It's real interesting. I really like Melvin. He's a great guy and he's a good friend to the channel and I really appreciate him. Thanks, Melvin, for the story. Okay, I think that's going to do it for this video. I have a couple more that I wanted to read, but my daughter's here from out of town and I want to go see her. I miss her and I want to go spend some time with her, so I'm shutting this video down. But I'll be back soon with more viewer encounters, and I've also got a couple of encounters that people have told me stories about, and I've written them up, and they are awesome. They'll be coming up in the next week or so. So everybody stand by. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you guys on the next video.